It was a cold and misty morning in London. The city's narrow streets echoed with the rattling wheels of horse-drawn carriages, the distant hiss of coal smoke rising from chimneys, and the sharp clatter of footsteps on wet cobblestones. It was the 1850s Victorian England, an age of unmatched grandeur, yet also of deep, lingering shadows. In the palaces there was splendor, in the streets, misery. And at the very heart of this splendor stood the enormous dresses that defined a woman's status, garments that were both enchanting and torturous. These dresses, inflated with hoops known as crinolines and layered with endless folds of fabric, looked like works of art. From the outside, they embodied elegance, dignity, and wealth. The wider the skirt, the grander the lady was thought to be. But few ever spoke of the dark truth hidden beneath those silken domes. Living inside them was suffocating. Walking was a battle, breathing was restricted, and even the most basic human need, to relieve oneself, became a dreadful ordeal. This is the story of Eleanor, a young woman of 20, caught in the cruel beauty of the age. Born into one of London's established families, she grew up hearing her mother's relentless advice. A lady must always appear flawless, no matter the pain she endures. Those words, once a gentle lesson, had become her iron chains. That morning Eleanor was being dressed by her mother's maids. First came the layers of petticoats, then the corset, laced so tightly that her breath grew shallow and her vision blurred. Complaints, however, were forbidden. A lady endured in silence. Next, the crinoline was strapped on, thin metal hoops spreading wider and wider until Eleanor herself resembled a moving pavilion. Silk cascaded over the structure, turning her into a walking monument nearly a meter wide. She was preparing for the grand ball of the season. Nobles, politicians, and even members of the royal family would be in attendance. This night could shape her entire future, but Eleanor's thoughts were consumed not by excitement, but by dread. What if I need the toilet? In those towering gowns, relieving oneself was not only inconvenient, but humiliating. Many women avoided food or drink for hours before a ball. Some carried discreet chamber pots hidden in their carriages. For Eleanor, on her very first grand ball, even the slightest misstep could destroy her reputation forever. As the night wore on, the ballroom glittered beneath dazzling chandeliers, golden walls reflecting the glow of hundreds of candles. Men in tailored black coats moved with rigid poise, while the women glided like sculpted statues. Eleanor, graceful as ever, floated among them, yet with each passing hour the wine and water she had sipped began to betray her. A growing pressure in her stomach reminded her of the problem she most feared. Her heartbeat no longer raced from the thrill of dancing, but from panic. What am I to do? I cannot possibly manage this dress. What if I humiliate myself in front of them all? The thought tightened around her like her corset, crushing her. At last, unable to endure, Eleanor slipped toward her mother. In a hushed voice she whispered, "Mother, I need some air." Her mother's eyes flickered with understanding. Yet this was a subject that could not be spoken of. In Victorian society, even mentioning such a need was unspeakably improper, and so Eleanor's nightmare was only just beginning. When Eleanor returned to the ballroom, she fixed a false smile upon her lips. No one around her had the faintest idea of the humiliating ordeal she had just endured. The music still played, champagne glasses still clinked, gentlemen still offered charming compliments to the ladies. Yet Eleanor's mind was trapped behind the folding screen, where shame had mingled with necessity. What struck her most was the realization that she was not alone. Every woman in that glittering hall was enduring the same silent torment. For in those colossal gowns, the need for relief was society's greatest secret. From across the room, Eleanor noticed young Lady Margaret, pale and fragile. The girl's eyes shimmered with tears and her lips trembled faintly. Eleanor knew instantly what she was feeling, for she herself had suffered the same anguish only moments before. Margaret soon excused herself, hurrying toward the exit, but in her haste, her gown snagged on a table, knocking over a crystal glass. A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd, followed by nervous laughter. Yet no one spoke of the true cause. In Victorian society, a lady's discomfort was never acknowledged with sympathy. It was a source of whispered ridicule, a hidden disgrace. The truth was that many women suffered accidents in these very halls. Stories circulated of dancers from whose skirts an odor suddenly spread, or of chamber pots overturned unnoticed beneath the hems of gowns. The music, however, never stopped. Gentlemen looked away, ladies avoided each other's gaze, and the following morning the scandal would be the talk of the entire city. Worse still was the toll on women's health. The relentless corsets and towering crinolines often forced them to abstain from food and drink for hours before an event. Doctors of the time recorded frequent complaints of kidney pains and urinary inflammations. Though they rarely dared to write the cause, everyone knew the truth. Women could not relieve themselves naturally. Eleanor remembered the whispered confession of her mother, who once admitted that she had fainted at a ball. People believed it was from excitement, but the real reason was far more humiliating. She had been trying in vain to endure the pressure within her corset. The shame of that moment had never been spoken aloud, passed on only in hushed words. Now Eleanor felt the same invisible chains closing around her. Inside her chest, anger simmered. Why, she thought, why must society demand that we sacrifice our health, our comfort, even our dignity, for the sake of elegance? But these questions could not be voiced, not in this world where beauty and propriety outweighed truth. As the night wore on, the atmosphere of the ballroom grew stifling. Women trapped in their gowns perspired heavily. The effects of food and champagne gnawed at them, and behind their painted smiles, their eyes revealed the same silent fear. What if I cannot endure? What if I disgrace myself before them all? And then the moment came that would mark Eleanor forever. Amidst the dancers, Lady Whitmore, the wealthy banker's wife, suddenly collapsed. Guests rushed to her side, a doctor was summoned, and whispers of fainting spread. Yet those who had sharp eyes noticed the truth, a dark stain spreading from beneath her gown, trickling across the polished floor. In an instant, every woman's face flushed crimson, while the men turned their heads in stiff silence. Not a word was spoken, but all understood. Eleanor's heart clenched as she watched. This could happen to any of us, she thought bitterly, for their fate as women of the age was always the same, to live caught between splendor and shame. After Lady Whitmore collapsed, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted instantly. The music stopped, the laughter ceased. Guests hurriedly brought folding screens and carried the fainted lady out. No one spoke openly, but everyone had seen the truth. The small, shameful stain on the floor had once again exposed the greatest secret of Victorian women. The men whispered behind pursed lips, some with faintly condescending smiles, others shaking their heads as if pitying a poor woman. The women avoided eye contact. This was not just Lady Whitmore's embarrassment, it was the shared nightmare of every lady present. Eleanor felt her chest tighten. A voice inside her whispered, "One day this could happen to me too." In her eyes, Lady Whitmore was not a fallen woman. She was a mirror reflecting all women trapped by chains of expectation. By midnight, the ball had finally dispersed. Guests climbed into their carriages and vanished into the darkened streets. Eleanor and her mother returned home. Peering out from the carriage window, Eleanor saw the poor women walking along London's wet sidewalks, wrapped in thin shawls, carrying small baskets, hustling through the drizzle. They wore no magnificent crinolines, yet Eleanor thought, perhaps they were freer than us. At least their bodies were their own to control. When they arrived home, the servants helped Eleanor to her room. She unfastened her corset to take a deep breath. Her body bore bruises hidden beneath the gown's splendor. She was exhausted, yet her mind raced. That night, just before sleep, her mother opened the door slightly. Their eyes met. In a quiet voice, her mother said, "You remember, years ago it happened to me too. We all go through it. There is no escape from this fate, my daughter." Eleanor nodded, but a spark of rebellion had ignited within her. Is there truly no escape, she wondered? Could someone, someday, break these chains? The next day the scandal spread quickly among London's women. Rumors traveled fast. "Lady Whitmore fainted at the ball," some whispered. "You know what really happened?" others added. Women confided in one another, sharing their own experiences. Some revealed how they secretly carried their little pots. Others told of days spent fasting before a ball just to survive. One woman leaned toward Eleanor and said, "For us, there is no such thing as a toilet. For us, there is only shame." The words echoed in Eleanor's mind. It was true. A toilet, one of the most basic human needs, had become a taboo for women. While men acted freely, women had to conceal, endure, and suffer in silence, even for the simplest bodily functions. And Eleanor realized something fundamental. The true struggle of a Victorian woman was never with men. It was with her own dress, her own corset, her own chains. A few days later, Eleanor secretly met with a group of neighboring women. It was not a formal gathering, just a dimly lit parlor where coffee was served. The door was slightly ajar, curtains drawn tightly. What they discussed could ignite scandal if overheard. The women whispered their ballroom stories to one another, sharing even the most humiliating moments without shame. One woman said, "Last week, Lady Harrington at the ball. Well, she had to find a pot immediately. We all knew, but no one could tell her to her face." The others laughed quietly. The laughter, though soft, carried relief and a sense of solidarity. For the first time, Eleanor realized she was not alone. These women, though bound by society's chains, created a small space of freedom simply by sharing their pain. As the conversation continued, the topic of bathroom methods grew more detailed. Some used hidden pots, others made use of small openings in the layers of their skirts. Many fasted or restricted liquids for days before attending a ball, hoping to avoid the problem entirely. Others carried tiny porcelain vessels in their bags, discreetly tending to their needs in back rooms. Listening, Eleanor felt a mix of shock and unease, but also a strange sense of relief. This was no longer a secret. It was a shared reality, and that small acknowledgment offered a quiet but powerful sense of freedom. One woman whispered, "The worst part is, sometimes men notice but pretend not to. It's both mockery and silent consent." The words echoed in Eleanor's mind. The hypocrisy of society, the contradiction beneath the splendor, fueled a growing anger inside her. The stories of women suffering beneath the weight of crinolines revealed the facade of the entire era. In that moment, Eleanor made a decision. She would not suffer this experience in silence alone. One day, she would make others see it too. Until that day came, she would continue to submit to the chains of corset and gown. But now, she was aware. The shame and pain endured by women could no longer remain a secret. When the secret meeting ended, the women embraced one another. It was a small, silent act of solidarity. As Eleanor returned to her room, she felt a weight lift from her heart, for even briefly, sharing the burden had lessened it. That night, Eleanor reflected on the days spent trapped within her crinoline, the fears she had faced at the ball, and the courage she had heard in the hidden conversations. She understood that the true battle of a Victorian woman was not only with the outside world, but also with the internal chains imposed by her dress and society. And Eleanor S.'s story was becoming more than her own. It was the quiet cry of all women of her time. In the days following the ball, Eleanor decided to change her routine. She would no longer focus solely on appearances. She would find ways to manage her gown and crinoline hoops more practically. Her first step was learning how to handle the layers and hoops of her dress efficiently. Together with her maid, she developed special buttons, hidden openings, and quick-release methods. It was a small but significant victory. Each time she practiced it, the fear and shame she had once felt lessened. As the days passed, Eleanor continued to hold secret meetings with other women. The shared experiences sparked new ideas. Some ladies prepared in advance for the ball with specific strategies. Others added hidden pockets or discreet slits to their skirts. Eleanor observed carefully and refined her own methods. She no longer wanted merely to survive the night. She wanted to take control. One day, as Eleanor prepared for a grand soiree, a daring idea came to her. She rearranged the layers and hoops of her gown in such a way that she could maintain her elegance while also managing her bathroom needs discreetly. The first attempt was challenging, but she succeeded. It was a small revolution for her. She had, in a way, broken the physical and social chains imposed by society. This newfound freedom gradually inspired other women. Those who learned Eleanor's techniques began making similar adjustments to their own dresses. Quietly but effectively, a subtle change was beginning in the lives of Victorian women. Yet Eleanor also realized another truth. No matter the precautions, the weight of society's expectations and the cumbersome dresses would always remain. Ball nights were still tests, each step still a struggle. But Eleanor no longer feared them. Sharing her shame, seeking solutions, and learning from others had made her strong. In her own small world, Eleanor had claimed a secret yet powerful freedom beneath the folds of her gown. This experience became a secret she would carry for the rest of her life, but it was also a triumph. For anyone seeking to understand the glamorous yet torturous lives of Victorian women, Eleanor's story offered a poignant, sometimes tragicomic and instructive example. A few months later, Eleanor was preparing to attend one of the grandest balls in the city. She was no longer inexperienced. She had refined her methods and learned to manage her crinolines and corsets with skill. The gowns were still heavy, but she now moved with strategy and purpose, each step carefully calculated. How to sit, how to walk while controlling the skirt, and how to discreetly handle any sudden need for the toilet. When the ball began, Eleanor navigated the room with poise. Men watched her with admiration, while women observed with a mix of envy and quiet respect. Yet Eleanor's mind was elsewhere, listening discreetly to whispered conversations, noting who else suffered the same silent torment. Then the expected moment arrived. While dancing, Eleanor felt the familiar pressure of needing to relieve herself. But panic no longer gripped her. She executed her secret plan with precision, skillfully lifting the layers of her gown, using her hidden porcelain vessel, and completing the task unnoticed. It was a victory, for she had protected both her body and her dignity. Yet not all women were so fortunate. At a ball just weeks earlier, a young lady had fainted, and a small spill had spread beneath her dress across the ballroom floor. Men looked on in embarrassed silence, while the women whispered quietly among themselves. These incidents revealed the tragicomic side of the era and the hidden suffering endured by Victorian women. Eleanor realized that these moments, as humiliating as they were, could also foster a quiet solidarity. Women survived by sharing tips, helping one another discreetly, and laughing together over the shared ordeal. This invisible camaraderie was as powerful as the glittering spectacle of the balls themselves. That evening, when Eleanor finished her dances, her heart raced not just from the music, but from the freedom she had quietly claimed. The crinoline and corset still restricted her, but she was no longer afraid. She understood that these chains were temporary, overcome with cleverness, courage, and mutual support. Eleanor's story offered a window into the lavish yet torturous lives of Victorian women. The act of attending to one's most basic need, the toilet, became a symbol of the shame and control imposed by society. And through Eleanor, the silent cries of an entire generation of women were carried forward, echoing into the present as both a caution and a testament.